Okay. You're on.
Okay. Colleagues, once again, we're coming to the close of a challenging and rewarding academic year. This is our last faculty council meeting of the year and one of 2 meetings of the general faculty. Over the last weeks, we have enjoyed uniting around our men's and women's basketball teams, and I want to congratulate both teams on their perseverance and other accomplishments through the highs and lows of the season. It has been fun to come together and united behind these young people and their terrific coaches. Also this year, we have said goodbye to faculty colleagues we will miss, and thank you for taking a moment of silence and reflection as we honor them. Elena, do we have our slideshow? Thank you. We have a full agenda today, but before we get started, I want to take a minute to thank all of you who participate in faculty governance, whether you stand for election, agree to serve on an appointed committee, or lead a particular effort. As the last 2 years have demonstrated, faculty governance, as well as student and staff leadership, is important. Faculty, staff, and student governments are independent. These are parts of the university that are truly representative to the extent that people choose to get involved, standing for election, agreeing to serve on appointed committees, and by voting in our campus elections. Your ballot came to you yesterday. Take a minute to fill out that ballot and make your choices by April 19th. Faculty voice is only as strong as those who participate in it. Last week, I, along with a few others at UNC, participated in a mini conference at Duke entitled Democracy and the Politics of Higher Education. It was a powerhouse of participants from across the country, thinking about the role of universities in a democracy, discussing how and when institutions should speak out on particular issues, and how to navigate complicated political waters. I was intimidated when it was my time to speak about Carolina, but I started out by saying what I truly believe. We are in the headlines for good and ill because what we do here and what we stand for matters. The struggles we face are happening in different forms on many campuses across the country. Other institutions and faculties watch what happens here in hopes that we can figure out how to navigate seriously choppy waters. The conversations that we have are sometimes hard, but it is the fact that we have them that is important. I want you to know that on many campuses, both within the UNC system and beyond, they cannot count on their chancellor and provost or presidents meeting with them on a regular basis. They simply have no clear, regular, direct lines of communication. That has never been the case here, and I hope it never will be. We will have a difficult conversation today concerning speech, email privacy, disclosures, and surveillance. There are several relevant considerations in my view. First, what an institution is allowed to do, whether an institution should do what they are allowed to do in a particular instance, and how an institution goes about taking such an action. I have my own opinions about the events once again in the news that transpired around the husband-donor agreement, but my opinions are not important. What is critical is the degree to which we as a faculty have confidence that our administration is acting justly and fairly in any given circumstance. I hope our conversation today can move us in that direction by providing an opportunity to think together with our administrative leaders about these questions that may have different answers in different sets of circumstances. We also have plenty of new business to attend to today, so we'll start off with remarks from our Chancellor and Provost, and rather than have Q&A immediately after those remarks, I've asked our colleague from the School of Law, Professor Mary Rose Papandrea, to give us a high-level view of privacy and speech for faculty on campus. We'll then turn to a discussion of these issues with the Chancellor, Provost, and Professor Papandrea. Likely, we will not get every answer we want today or come to clear consensus. Other conversations may be needed. So I'll stop the conversation after 20 minutes or so that we can move on to our other business at that time. Chancellor, I'll hand it over to you at this point.
Great. Thank you, Mimi. And I hope that all of you have had a chance to see some of the amazing installations on campus over the past few days, and especially today as we celebrate Arts Everywhere Day. As I said on my campus message today, a core part of Carolina's mission is to be a venue, a patron, an advocate, and an all-around supporter of art and culture in our state, from dance, music to photography exhibits to documentary screenings, even a cathartic communal scream on Polk Place, which took place earlier today. The big scream, as it was called, Arts Everywhere, showcases the power of art on our campus. And I just want to thank the Arts Everywhere team for their work to make this all possible, and everyone who participated. I have to start my remarks today, as Mimi did, talking about just a bit about the success of our basketball teams. And especially over this past weekend, there was a lot of excitement here on campus as well as down in New Orleans. We didn't get the seventh national title that we had hoped for, but something about this team felt bigger, and I hope that you sensed that as well. The heart, the dedication, and the selfless teamwork that we saw was truly amazing. I'm so grateful to Coach Davis and our amazing student athletes for inspiring us this March Madness, and especially over these past few weeks. And the same holds true for our women's team. Under Coach Courtney Bankhart, the women's team advanced to the Sweet 16 and pushed the eventual national champion, South Carolina, to the bitter end. And so the stories of these teams and the challenges that they had to overcome are really impressive. And I hope that they were as inspiring to you as they were to me. And we have a lot of other successful student athletes out there on our lacrosse teams, our golf teams, tennis teams competing this spring as well, our baseball team. And so I hope you'll take some time to go out and cheer them on as well. Today, I want to quickly share a few updates before I turn it over to Chris Clemens. First, I just want to say that I spent the first part of the week over in Cullowhee at the Western Carolinas campus where the Board of Governors meeting was held. And happy to say that the Board of Governors approved our university's lease for an innovation hub on East Rosemary Street and Franklin Street over at 137 East Franklin, where the old CVS building used to be. And you've seen that renovation taking place. And this will be the home to Innovate Carolina. This is really important, something we've been working on for probably the past 6-7 years. We've been talking about this innovation corridor that would connect Rosemary Street, Franklin Street, and many of the business partners there to come down through Porthole Alley, connecting the academic affairs part of our campus and extending down over to health affairs, such that we could have a unique innovation corridor here at Carolina. And so I'm pleased that that was approved, and it'll be the catalyst for a lot of great things to come over the next few years. And so stay tuned for more on that. Also at that meeting, they approved the Carolina Community Academy, which is a partnership between UNC-Chapel Hill and the Person County Schools as one of the 9 approved UNC system laboratory schools. The Carolina Community Academy will launch this coming August, and it'll be at full capacity with serving about 120 students in grade K, kindergarten through 2nd grade. And then students will seamlessly transition to North Elementary School at grade 3. And with exceptional teaching and leadership, the partnership will bring the full bandwidth of UNC-Chapel Hill to support the Academy's students, families, and community. And this has been led tirelessly over the past 7 or 8 months by our School of Education. A campus coalition is being built to support the Carolina Community Academy. And to date, that coalition includes the School of Education, the School of Social Work, Dentistry, School of Information Library Sciences, Public Health, and Medicine. So there's going to be a lot of wraparound services for these students. And we'll also include the Moorhead Planetarium, the Stone Center, and UNC Athletics as part of this. And so searches are currently underway for the Academy's new principal, several teachers, and other specialists. And so I just want to thank Dean Fouad Adel-Halik, who has led this effort for his leadership and innovation. And this is going to be one of the best lab schools in our state. And this was really important to move this forward. And when I talk about being passionately public, this is what it means. It's using our expertise to serve the people of our state. And so again, I want to thank Fouad and a number of other folks who really have helped to make this possible. Second, I want to congratulate our graduate programs and schools and the leadership there and our world-class faculty in our graduate programs for the recent rankings by U.S. News and World Report. This is something that we wait for every year, and some programs are ranked every 2nd year or 3rd year. But again, in these most recent rankings, our programs are among the best in the nation. 19 of our graduate programs were among the top 10 in their respective categories. Special shout out to the Gilling School of Global Public Health. They ranked second overall and maintained our top position as the top public school of public health in the nation. Again, a credit to the world-class faculty and leadership there under Dean Barbara Reimer. Also, our School of Law ranked 8th among public law schools and has jumped 22 spots since 2019. It's incredible. And again, want to just compliment the hard work of Dean Martin Brinkley and the faculty in the law school. I could go on and compliment a lot of folks, but I just want to say thank you. Altogether, 30 of our programs increased their rankings from last year. And these rankings speak to your excellence, resilience, and commitment. And again, during a very difficult time throughout the past 2 years throughout the pandemic. So thank you. And I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize our graduate students. As this week is Graduate and Professional Student Appreciation Week. I just want to thank them for their dedication and acknowledge the important role that they play at our university. And then third, I want to just mention the Great Resignation. We're hearing more and more about this, and I just want to say that it's real. And it's something we have to pay attention to. This was also discussed this week at the Board of Governors meeting. It's affecting every campus in our UNC system and most universities across the country. And I'm a member of a university presidents roundtable group, 12 university presidents and chancellors from around the country. And this was a topic of discussion 3 weeks ago up in Washington, D.C., as we began to strategize about how we can do something to offset this Great Resignation. And I guess, and again, I think there will be more work needs to be done on this. Becky Mangini, our Vice Chancellor for Human Resources, is working really hard on this as we rethink the workforce at Carolina and the different approaches to keeping our top talent here on our campus. But I guess I would just ask, if you have a chance, just say thank you. I mean, our staff are working tirelessly. Many of them are working 2 jobs right now or more, filling some of the vacancies that exist. We're working hard to begin restructuring and thinking about the salary bands for certain positions so that we can keep our best talent, critically important talent here. So just occasionally a simple thank you to those that allow our faculty and grad students to continue doing their work every day. And finally, I'll just mention, I talked with Mimi yesterday, something that I know we're beginning to hear more and more about, and that's that as we're beginning to travel more for university business, I have heard several concerns, complaints about the Concur travel system, and it's creating frustrations and inefficiencies, I think, quite frankly, for many people, including myself. And so I've had 2 conversations now with Nate Knuffman, who will be part of the meeting later today, and he will briefly address this in terms of wanting to hear your voices and concerns about this. But I know people are concerned about the efficiency and the limitations that it's putting on many of us who are traveling. And so we're going to address it a bit later on the agenda, but it's probably going to warrant some further conversation. So I know I went a little bit long there. There's a lot happening. It's just great to see the activity on campus as we work toward the home stretch here of the spring semester. So thanks for all you do. And I'm going to turn it over to Provost Clements.
Thanks, Kevin. It definitely is the time of year. Lots going on. I will add my thanks to our graduate students and their Graduate and Professional Student Appreciation Week. I stopped by over near Polk Place. They had a table with cookies and some beanbag toss, and it was great to see them out. Also earlier today, we celebrated faculty during the Faculty Service Awards ceremony. Ms. Lissa Lampkin-Broom, Distinguished Professor in the UNC School of Law, and Dr. Joseph Jordan, Vice Provost and Director of Academic and Community Engagement, both received awards for their service to the university, so I'd like to recognize them as well. In the Provost's office, the transition team continues to work on our plan for supporting faculty advancement, success, and leadership. This week, the team heard presentations from the Faculty Affairs and Leadership Development Program in the Medical School, the Center for Faculty Excellence, and the Institute for Arts and Humanities. It was a great meeting that highlighted some of the strong programs we already have to support faculty, but also revealed areas where we have work to do. Some of this work will be connecting elevating and expanding the reach of the existing programs, and some will be building into the gaps that we see. We're also working to make sure we have appropriate representation and multiple points of contact between the campus and the provost office. In support of these efforts, we are requesting the creation of a new position in the provost office, the first vice provost for faculty advancement and success. This vice provost will offer a chance to expand representation of health affairs in the provost office, and will also develop and manage a leadership training program for faculty in this office. The new position will help develop and oversee the expansion and elevation of programs for faculty success and leadership. Once the position is established, we'll be making an internal call for nominees, and we hope to have the new vice provost in place before Ron Strauss departs the office in June, this office in June. I can also now update you on some of the many searches underway on campus, and we do have many. Under the leadership of Joseph Jordan, Vice Provost for Academic and Community Engagement, we've just completed interviews for candidates for the directors of the American Indian Center and the Women's Center. Vice Provost Jordan has also launched the search for his own replacement as director of the Sonia Hayes Stone Center for Research in Black Cultures and Histories. And you all should have received the call for nominations and applications on March 25th. We're nearing the end of interviews for dean candidates for the College of Arts and Sciences and the School of Public Health. We're also interviewing candidates for the academic lead of the new School of Data Science and Society we hope to establish within this year. Search committees have been formed for the Dean of the School of Government and the Vice Provost and University Librarian. Both of these committees will be charged by the Chancellor by the end of the month. And finally, we're in the last stages of negotiations for the Dean of the Adams School of Dentistry and the School of Nursing, and we hope to be able to announce deans for those schools very soon. That is a large number of searches, and I want to thank the HR staff who are working hard to keep them running smoothly, and the many faculty, staff, and students who are engaged in the work of selecting new leadership for the campus. You have noticed that it is spring, and our campus is beautiful, and it's being ready for graduation. The groundskeepers and staff have put things in great shape, including the new reopened concourse between Memorial and Phillips Hall, where stands the new Curtis Media Center. It has emerged from its cocoon, and it is spectacular. And I want to congratulate the university architect and her staff and the Husband School for a great job. You should go by and see it if you have not at your earliest opportunity. An item that did not make the news, I think, is that the Undergraduate Student Senate has passed Resolution 103-377, calling for the removal of the tent on Polk Place and the restoration of the green space there. I'm pleased to announce that after graduation, we will be removing all the tents and restoring green spaces. These were temporary structures, never meant to be there permanently, and let's hope they don't have to come back. One last item that I see is now on the agenda, and so I'll be brief because I know it'll get discussed. At my first meeting here with you, I told you that I would advocate for a faculty-first approach to decision-making. I dropped the executive vice chancellor title off my signature, and I told you that trusting and supporting the faculty would be the main focus of the provost's office under my direction. I also told you that we were reviewing delegated authorities, both in our office and outside, to be sure that we understood them, that they made sense, and that they respected the principles of shared governance. I spent some time this week learning about a policy that we will discuss shortly, and one that I will need your guidance and input to use responsibly. It's our policy on the privacy of electronic information, and it allows access to email and other electronically stored records under limited circumstances and via specific procedures. The authority for granting this access is delegated to the provost and the general counsel. Before we begin our discussion, I want to tell you a little bit about what I've learned about the policy this week. First, I hope everyone is aware that emails and other electronic records stored on university servers are generally accessible through public records requests. This is both required under law, and it's an important mechanism for transparency in our state. And many of you are aware that my own emails have not only been theoretically subject to public scrutiny, but have been scrutinized by media and public in the past. Let's be clear that university emails are not being surveilled. However, given the ownership of electronic records on university servers, A policy is required to limit and regulate access to those records by university officials in order to maintain a degree of privacy in our work. And that's one of the purposes of the electronic records policy that we're going to discuss today. I can't speak for how the policy has been applied by provosts in the past, but I can assure you how I will approach the issue. I want to listen carefully to the discussion so I can make good faculty-centered decisions about its use in the future. I like very much the way that Mimi has framed the questions, and so I won't repeat them, but it is important that we work out how the policy is applied. I'm also aware that there's a standing committee of the Faculty Council, FETAC, and I'd like to work with them to understand best application of the policy and perhaps invite the General Counsel and other members of his staff who have to work with these policies to explain them in more detail in the future to that committee or to the Faculty Council. If we wish to look at revisions in the policy, if we decide that's necessary, then we should have input to make sure that it's serving its purpose well. With that, I'll turn the discussion back to the chair for further questions and for the discussion that I know will follow.
Thank you both to the Chancellor and to you, Provost Clements. I think what I'd like to do next, if it's okay, is to have Professor Papandrea talk with us about her kind of view of all of this, or the legal sort of framework, and then we'll go into discussion. And we will, at that point, once this discussion sort of concludes, if there are other matters that people want to ask you questions about, we'll go to those. But I want to stay focused on these privacy concerns first. Mary Rose, are you ready?
Yes.
And I want to thank you so much, first of all, for doing this. We asked you at the very last minute, and you were willing to step up and help us, and it's very much appreciated.
Well, thank you, Mimi. It's always my honor to serve this university. Thank you for having me. I'm going to be offering a brief overview of the legal landscape involved with the issues of email surveillance of the faculty here. I do want to be clear. I have not spoken to the University Counsel's office, and I'm basing my analysis here on solely publicly available information about the university's policies. I also want to apologize in advance. I am keeping my overview very short, so please forgive the lack of an in-depth legal analysis. Some of these issues are a little complicated. I'm going to present my analysis by answering a series of questions that Mimi had sent to me. So I'll begin with, are donor agreements private or matters of public record? And this is an important threshold question as we think about whether it's appropriate to look in email to determine who revealed these agreements. So public information access is regulated state by state under individual freedom of information laws, and each state defines in its own way what constitutes a public body, public records, and public meetings. In North Carolina, the public records laws do apply to every agency, state and local government in North Carolina, unless there is an exception. So of course, the University of North Carolina is a state entity. What's a little tricky with donor agreements is that donations are typically made to a foundation. And because foundations are generally structured as private corporations and not government agencies, it is a hotly debated issue, not just I would say at this moment with UNC, but around the country, of whether donor agreements should be matters of public record. And in determining that, a court would look at all the facts and circumstances to determine whether the entity, the foundation, showed that the government exercised such substantial control over the operations. I should say that UNC exercised such substantial control over the operations of the foundation as to render it a government agency or subdivision. I am not prepared to answer that question. That is not being litigated because when a records request was made to the university, ultimately the university has turned over a copy of the agreement. I don't think that it's fair to say that the university concedes that this is a public record, but in any event, the matter is moot because this particular donor agreement was turned over. I should also add that this particular agreement was between the Hussman Family Foundation the foundation and UNC-Chapel Hill, which may obviate the need to determine whether the foundation is considered a government entity. Okay, next question. Is it possible for a university to punish a faculty member for revealing a donor agreement? Well, I would start my legal analysis by looking first at whether this donor agreement is a matter of public record. It would not make any sense and would likely be unconstitutional to punish a faculty member for sharing the contents of a donor agreement if that agreement is a matter of public record, even if the university had hoped to keep the agreement confidential. And I will say, many of you have seen the Hussman gift agreement. It does, by its terms, say that the university will keep it confidential, but that alone would not be determinative. If the donor agreement is confidential and not a matter of public record, there's no explicit policy here at UNC that prohibits faculty members from revealing the contents of a confidential donor agreement. We have a university policy that governs the suspension, demotion, or discharge of faculty members, and that policy is very limited and does not appear to cover this situation, although I'm happy to be told otherwise. If, however, this policy did exist, my argument would be that it would likely be unconstitutional unless the professors had access to those policies, to the agreement as part of their job responsibilities. For example, if the professor were the dean, if a professor or staff member received a copy of the donor agreement from another person, i.e. another leaker higher up in the chain, it would probably violate the First Amendment to punish the unauthorized disclosure of that donor agreement. I should also mention in passing here, it is likely that courts would recognize the rights of professors to criticize the terms of the Hussman gift. A full analysis of that issue would take much more time than I have here. Now to the university policy on the privacy of faculty emails. Thank you, Provost Clemens, for highlighting that university does have a policy that's called the Privacy of Electronic Information. And you all should be able to access this, I believe, through a link on the agenda. Please note the policy states very clearly, wherever possible in a public setting, individuals' privacy should be preserved. However, there is no guarantee of privacy or confidentiality for data stored or messages stored or sent on university-owned equipment. And you all can look at this policy for yourself. There are a number of delineated instances where university officials are permitted to read the electronic email. And I will say, Provost Clemens and others, if you do look at this policy, one of these provisions is very vague and perhaps could encompass any reason at all, really, the university wants to look at the email. And that's provision C, which allows the university to look at the email to retrieve or review for university purposes, university-related information. And I don't really know what that means. And I wouldn't know how to put a limiting construction on that. The policy also allows investigation, the violation of university policy or state or local law, or investigations of employee misconduct. Let's see. And as I was very happy that Provost Clemens also mentioned that faculty should be aware that our emails are subject to public records requests. So just my usual approach to my emails is anything I write, I want to be prepared for it to appear on the cover of the NNO. So that's just the way I roll, and I would recommend the rest of you to do the same. One question Mimi asked me was, does the authority for searching emails vary on whether it's a public or private institution? And I added, does it matter that this is an academic institution? And generally speaking, most institutions and employers retain the right to access emails and documents stored on their systems and devices, regardless of whether the institution is public or private. And in fact, many private employers retain absolute authority to do that. So just be aware that this is not an outlier situation where the university would have access to your emails. Another question was, does an institution have to notify an employee in advance about the search? Our policy does not appear to require advance notice. Now, some of you may be familiar with legal holds, which notify employees not to destroy emails or documents relating to certain topics in pending litigation. But as a general matter, investigations into wrongdoing by employees themselves would not require advance notice. And I just urge you to think of this from a common sense approach. Advance notice might then lead to the destruction of these documents. So generally, notice is not required in those kinds of searches. So bottom line, you might be asking, well, what's the problem then with the email searches of the Hussman faculty? The main concern is not that there was a violation with the electronic information policy privacy policy, given especially that term that I told you about, where that allows investigations for university related business. That just encompasses everything. But rather, the concern here is twofold: that the search and the questioning of the professors was done in apparent retaliation for expressing public concerns about the handling of the Nicole Hannah Jones hire, and that email searches, even if technically permitted under the electronic privacy policy, can have a substantial chilling effect on the freedom of speech and association. And that leads me to conclude just to Mimi's statement at the outset, which is there are separate questions about what's legally permitted and then questions about what the university should do. And those are two separate inquiries. I've tried to just outline the legal landscape here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really very helpful and very comprehensive. I think really set a good frame for our conversation. And so at this point, what I'd like to do is open up the floor for questions related to this concern right now. And then I know there are people that have other questions that they would like to ask of the Chancellor and Provost on other subjects. But I'd like to conclude this part and then move to those questions if we can. So I see a hand up from Ryan.
Hi, thanks very much for taking on this important topic. This information came to light just last week as a result of records requests that our faculty made to get some more information about something we suspected had been happening based on conversations with our colleagues a long time ago, several months ago. These requests were originally made back in August, and they had to deal with understanding how this policy was being implemented and who was being targeted. And so, as we've discussed, a lot of the documents and emails on our computers are public record, and that's what we requested. What we got back just last week after waiting 7 months was heavily redacted. It did not include the names of the faculty who were part of this investigation, and it didn't include the justification. It appears that that part was redacted with no rationale about why those parts of the email would not be part of the statute, the state public record law. And that makes it really challenging for folks that believe they have a legal case to see this information that should be public to challenge the university. And I think that the issue that we brought up is really important, that it's this, the validity of this query depends on whether or not these donor agreements, and this one in particular, was a public record. So thank you, Mary Rose, for weighing in on that key point. So my question would be, I'm sorry, that was a long preamble. The questions would be the ones that I did address to Kevin via email only a few days ago. Which faculty had their accounts and computer backup files accessed by University Counsel? What was the scope and justification for the access? And is there anything in current policy that guides when the university should notify employees? And if not, should there be? Thank you again, very, very much.
So Ryan, I'm gonna take. I have asked around and learned some things about your middle question, your second question, which is the scope of the inquiry. I should say before I start, I've seen the documents that were delivered. I haven't seen unredacted versions of them, and because the provost doesn't have access during any of this. This is done through an e-discovery query, and his eyes for those who need to see it. And I didn't, and I wasn't here at the time, but even then I might not have. So let me talk a little bit about your second question about the scope. It was actually never, as I understand it, an investigation into any faculty or staff misconduct. It was an investigation for a particular purpose having to do with record security. So our donor interactions require the storing of lots of data, donor data, these kinds of records that you saw, the gift agreements. These are stored in a system called Davy, and you may know about this system, but I doubt very many of you have ever actually been in it. And the reason is it has a history of interactions, comments on the donors, information that's private. And I think that there's not an argument that some of that information is private. And certainly in order to protect donor confidentiality, it needs to remain private. So when something that belongs to that system finds its way out of the system, it raises the question that there may be a breach in that system of some kind. And as I understand the investigation, which is over, by the way, there's no open investigation. It was not to look for misconduct by individuals. It was to try to establish what needed to be done to protect or enhance the security of that Davy system, which needs to remain secure for those donor records. So I've not heard anyone say, nor have I found any evidence here, that any faculty were under an individual investigation of them. The questions at hand were about the system's security, and not about, nor has there been subsequent to any of the e-discovery searches for the document any action taken to put faculty under investigation, and nor are there any faculties or staff associated with this under investigation. So that's sort of what I know about the scope of the query. I realize that may not settle everyone's questions. It's why I think we need to talk about this policy, and why we need to, I mean, I feel like this policy puts a kind of grave responsibility in the provost's hands, and one that I don't even want to begin to execute without listening to you very carefully, and of course understanding this particular case very, very well. So,
and if I could just follow up, and thanks, Chris, for jumping in, but and Ryan, I appreciate the questions. I want to be clear that there was no investigation. This was an inquiry. This is conducted, as I have learned about it over the past few days as well, while I was at the Board of Governors meeting as well, is that much like an EOC, the EOC process, there is first an inquiry. And if something is revealed there, that's the point at which an investigation might begin. And so what was conducted is my understanding, and as Chris has done more on this over the past few days, because he's been here on campus and I've not been, was that a data inquiry was conducted to determine how a release of a donor agreement had occurred. And the focus of that inquiry was always on information relevant to the agreement, not employee speech in any way. And that inquiry was limited to the access and the possession and disclosure of that agreement alone. So I just want to reiterate what Chris has already said, and that is that our university emails are not being surveilled in any way. This is a part of a protection against data breaches, and a data breach occurred, at least was believed to have occurred at that point.
I do want to, before going to Eric, I just want to kind of recast that a little bit, because I understand there's a distinction between an inquiry and an investigation, but I don't know that there is a distinction in how that feels to the faculty member when they are being, when they are asked to come in and undergo questioning. So, the impact, the intent of the may be different, but the impact may be the same to make someone feel that they are under investigation, no matter how it's parsed in other ways, which is an important consideration going forward. Eric, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Mimi. As it happens now, I think I'm mostly going to echo or maybe even make louder the point that you just made. I wanted to start by saying how incredibly proud I am of my colleague, Mary Rose Papandrea, who gave just a knockout summary of complicated law. And she's amazing. And I just thought it was great. At the very end, Mary Rose mentioned that these kinds of inquiries, even if legally justified or justified under regulations of the university, can have a chilling effect on speech. And I wanted to supplement Mary Rose's excellent point by noting as well that they can have a chilling effect or a depressing effect on faculty morale, which maybe is the point that you, I think, were just making. Like, we all have authority to do lots of things in our lives, but that doesn't mean that we do them because we're afraid that it might have adverse impacts. I When my daughters were in high school, I had the authority to go into their rooms at any time and search around, but I didn't do it because I was concerned about my relationship with my daughters. And so I think that that analogy is relevant here, because whatever the legal questions are, there has to be consideration. I mean, system security is not an absolute value. The fact that this may have been intended to investigate or to determine the existence of a breach of system security in and of itself doesn't mean you have to do something about it. And it doesn't dictate what it is you have to do. So this isn't a question, this is a comment. I really hope that as we continue this discussion, and Chris in the Provost's office, as you continue your reflection, that there will be ample reflection on the really, frankly, devastating impact that this can have on the sense that faculty have of being secure in their own place of employment, let alone trusted by their employer. Thanks.
So Eric, I just want to thank you for that comment. I think you know me well enough to know what my visceral instincts are on this. I mean, I've talked to you about wanting to put the cutlass in my teeth, climb the mast, and hoist the skull and crossbones sometimes. I totally understand how one can eradicate a good relationship through missteps that break the trust of the faculty. And that is the last thing I'd ever want to do at this desk, because I believe in you and I trust you. And I want you to ask questions, tough questions, both about the world and about us and our operations. And I think you should feel the freedom to do that. And you know, it's sometimes it's a little chilling knowing that our emails can show up in the in-and-out, but my reaction to that has started to be, so what? You know, I'm not doing anything I don't want people to see, so come and get it. But there are times when you want to have a discussion, so and not feel that someone's looking over your shoulder. I think I will reiterate the point that no one sort of thumbs through emails, even in the legal process where this is done. It's an e-discovery search. If it turns up too many hits, they narrow the search until something comes that's manageable, and then those might get looked at for a public release or something like this. But it's a little comfort to know those things if you feel that somehow this policy can be used as a tool to do other than what is intended. So I hear what you're saying.
And I just want to say that we're committed to looking at this. I think this has brought up a number of questions that are very fair questions. And I've asked Chris and some folks from General Counsel's office to look at this, and I think engage the faculty council committee that Chris referenced earlier, so that we can feel good about how we move forward, and there may need to be adjustments to that policy.
Yeah, and I should say, I talked to Charles just before this meeting, and he is more than willing to have the councils who actually have to implement the policy when it's implemented come to FETAC and talk about how that works and what we might do with the policy and so forth. So I think there's no doubt we are going to be looking at the policy. I'm already looking at the policy and I have some suggestions, but we don't need one set of suggestions from me. What we need are good ideas from the faculty and through the faculty council committee, I think.
Ryan.
Mimi, I just wanted to remind you that Chris and I both have to jump into the Philanthropic Council meeting here probably in about, I think we probably got about 2 or 3 minutes left, and we have to jump in a car and run over to Keenan Center.
Okay. Ryan and then Allison.
I did want to come back, but I'd like Allison to go since she hasn't had a chance yet.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
I really appreciate that. I'll try to name my questions and maybe they're not answerable, so I'll say them and then paste them in the chat. Are the justification processes that, according to the document, involve the chancellor and the general counsel also openly available to those of us who might be interested or subject to open records requests? And someone mentioned the designated authority of the chancellor, and I'm just thinking about what we learned regarding how some designated authorities are being reclaimed by some of the higher governing bodies. And so is this one of those situations in which designated authority is coming from a higher governing body, or is it internal? And these are just really procedural questions, so I'll put them in the chat.
Allison, I'll answer the first question. I will tell you that my emails are always under review. And I just, for what it's worth, I rarely ever know that they're being reviewed. I mean, there are all sorts of records requests, and I think that's fairly standard. And I accepted that when I jumped into this role. Mike and they certainly were also available upon request when I was a faculty, just simply a faculty member. So that's the answer to that one. And it has to go through a formal process to receive those emails. And your second question, maybe Chris, since you've been looking into this, you might be able to better answer it. Maybe we lost, I don't know if Chris is still there.
Hold on, no, I just was muted. Allison, I don't know much more than what you can read in the policy here. As far as I know, this has not been redelegated outside the policy. So what it says is the system administrator, who is the person who's going to go into the records, really also often it's just legal, will need approval from the provost and the vice chancellor and general counsel. I assume that's the vice chancellor for our chief information officer, but again, the policy needs work because which vice chancellor is that? There are 3 approvals needed and none of them are the chancellor note. And that's why I was trying to address some of this, even though I was not provost at the time. I have to be one of the 3 approvals. And as chief academic officer, I would consider myself to be the gatekeeper of faculty rights in as much as I can represent those faculty rights as I understand them and they're articulated to me. So it's a responsibility that I didn't know about when I became provost. I hadn't read every policy, but it's one I find a little unease around, and I'm happy to have conversations to get input from folks.
Thank you so much for making time for my question, both of you. Thank you.
Ryan.
I wanted to say thanks again for everybody for their thoughtful comments and working through this. It's challenging. I would like to just follow back up and try to understand the rationale for this particular inquiry, since that rationale, I hear what everybody's saying, but that part was redacted from the information that we got, and that would have some increased trust, I think, if we could see the unredacted portion where that was spelled out at the time and not what we're hearing later. The other is I'm curious to understand why there was a reasonable belief that Hussman School staff and faculty would have access to the Davy system. It's not a system that I had ever heard about until after this inquiry came about.
Again, very few people have access to that, Ryan, and that's where these donor agreements are stored, and additional information about the donors and their history of giving. And so that my understanding, and again, I have not seen what was sent to you through the records request. I know Chris has had a chance to look at some of it, but it's my understanding that the individuals which may have had access to that was where the inquiry began. And
I'm gonna add to that in a general way, because I have some instructions about what I can and can't say about individual personnel. Generally speaking, in every school and in some departments, there may be, especially in schools, a point of access. I think there is at least one person who has access in every school, because you have to see some of these donor agreements. Now, when I was in physics, we printed them out, so I probably am going to be under some sanction for saying this, but I needed to look at them when we were dispersing money to be sure they were consistent with the gift agreement, and so I asked them to put them in a binder on the shelf, and then I would go look at them to be sure I was spending the money in the right way. So there sometimes are printed copies of some gift agreements, and the access through the system is maintained by individuals in each school who are designated to have access, but it is tightly controlled because of the nature of the information. It's typically not faculty, however.
Okay, I think we are going to have to bring this to a close, both because the chancellor and the provost have to leave. I know that people had questions for them on other topics. And what I would say is that we have our next faculty executive committee meeting on Monday, April 18th. the provost. That is a meeting that the provost would typically be joining us for. So that could be a time to ask those questions, unless you all can stay a few more minutes, but I think you're.
Yeah, I texted to say that we're running about 5 minutes behind. So we have to drive over to the Keenan Center for this presentation panel discussion. So I'm going to see if I can't get to that meeting on the 18th. It sounds like maybe Chris is already scheduled for it.
Yep. Okay, that would be terrific. So we'll do that at that point. So Jan, I'm sorry we're not getting to your, Jan, I'm sorry we're not getting to your question. And
Jan,
also,
send me your travel question and I'll answer it, and you can share it with whomever.
okay, terrific. And I think
Thanks.
Eric had a question on another topic too. So, but we'll just hold those if that's all right, or and get back to them at the executive committee meeting.
Great. Thank you. Have a
you
great
both.
weekend.
All right. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mary Rose, for that overview. Very, very helpful. And for everyone for your thoughtful questions and comments. All right. We are going to turn now to our budget update. We're trying to do this more regularly. Nate Knuffman has been really accommodating to join us from time to time. And I think there's a new budget model at the system level to sort of explain to us how that impacts what happens here.
Well, thank you. And it's very nice to be back with you all this afternoon. I have a slide deck I'd like to share with you just to provide some updates on where our budget model has evolved to and where we're at with our all funds budget process. Can everyone see this okay? Great. So I'm really pleased to talk about where we're at on all funds budgeting. Our budget we just worked through. This is for our fiscal year 23, so beginning in July of this year. It's balanced and fiscally sound. It puts resources to the university's top priorities, and it's a very big jump in terms of financial transparency. And I'd just like to acknowledge our team on the finance teams worked countless hours to help make this a possibility. And also the chancellor, really his executive sponsorship really was, we would not be here without it. So the schedule, we started this process back in October. We spent a lot of time compiling requests across campus, deliberating over those. And just 2 weeks ago, the Board of Trustees unanimously approved the all funds budget for fiscal year 23. The next step in this process, we're still not complete with all final approvals yet. There is a Board of Governors process and review that will happen in May, and we will be submitting materials for that process shortly. But we are getting closer to the end. What I wanted to talk about was really two big things today. One, this is our first time we're talking about the all funds budget and what it looks like on campus. So I wanted to share just some information about what it looks like in table form and a couple of highlights. And then the second part, I really want to spend time on where we focused our energies, were investments for new money. What were really the big driving forces behind our budget deliberations? And so the first, what do our numbers look like at UNC-Chapel Hill? Before I go into a table and show that, I did want to just note a couple considerations. This is the first time the campus is really putting out a publication of a prospective all funds budget. We've historically relied on an annual report. It's backward looking. It rolls things up at a top line so this is a big step. Really, we started this back in 2019, establishing a common format. I think we did build some trust. We really used that to not only weather the pandemic, but also address a structural shortfall over the last year or two. And now we're at the stage where we're really talking about investments. In this fiscal year 23, we're talking about new money and new investments. So I think a much stronger position. It is a starting point. It's a plan. The format is driven by the UNC System Office and the UNC Board of Governors. It's not necessarily what every unit would use to monitor and guide their activities. We do expect it to evolve. So our next iteration is likely to offer additional contextual information So with all that said, what do the numbers look like at UNC-Chapel Hill? Well, in total, we're about a $4 billion enterprise. And you can see that with our operating budget. This is for fiscal year 23. On this table, you see our revenues on the top half and the major categories, and then our major categories of expenses on the bottom half. The columns really represent different fund types. So you see our general fund in our first column, that's really tuition and appropriation. Our auxiliary and other trust fund, that's auxiliary sales and services. Overhead receipts is the F&A, the indirect funding. And then restricted trust funds is largely research, although there's also some aid in there, contracts and grants. And so you see our revenue profile, almost a little over $1 billion of the four is in the general fund side. So, roughly a quarter of our budget is tuition and appropriation. You also see that it's only a quarter. If you compare us to the rest of the UNC system, we're much more heavily weighted on these other areas that really reflect the diversity and complexity of our enterprise. The auxiliary and the research is obviously a big component of this. You can see when you compare revenue and expense, the revenue exceeds expense in total, general fund slightly above. You will see the expenses exceed auxiliary revenue. That's because we can actually use balances in these other trust fund categories. So general fund, we must balance. So those, you'll see the revenue exceed expense, but those other three categories, you can actually have planned expenditures into balance. So I wanted to also share, that was kind of top line, all university look. I wanted to share a little bit of information. This is just visual representation of the revenue profile of a couple units. Again, we don't have time to go through everything, but I did want to highlight just a few areas and kind of what these numbers look like and what it can kind of tell you. Here we're looking at general fund in blue, auxiliary orange, and then the overhead receipts and restricted trust funds largely reflects your research mission. And you can see, here we're looking at the college arts and sciences and some administrative units. And you'll note that aid and sponsored research have a much more smaller reliance on general fund. Of course, in research, that makes sense. There's much more research activity, and you see the yellow and gray bars, portions of their revenue profile much larger. On the financial aid side, similar, when you think about revenue and aid, a lot of it comes in the form of federal aid, and that's where you're getting to see the yellow and the orange in the state aid. So it overweights some of those pieces. Again, a visual representation here, we're just looking at our health schools. And you can see we've got school of nursing, pharmacy, public health, dentistry, and medicine. And what I think is noteworthy, you really see the clinical enterprise and that part of the mission stand out in the medicine revenue profile and the dentistry profile in the orange. You can also see the weighting of the research side comparatively on public health and in pharmacy in the yellow. And then I think in total, there's a little bit less reliance on general fund, just with a little bit less blue. On expenses, when we look at our university, again, I picked out a few other examples here where you can see, here we're looking at the various administrative units, and you can see expenses, salaries and benefits in blue, supplies in orange, services, gray, and then you've got scholarships and fellowships in yellow, and then debt and utilities and other in green. And what you note is public safety, advancement, human resources, university administration, all pretty consistent in terms of salary and benefit, primarily that area. You see that's not the case in business affairs or facilities or IT. On the business affairs and facilities side, you have debt payments coming out of those. So that's influencing that green section a little bit more. And then supplies and materials and equipment, just the mission you'd expect with facilities and energy services and IT, both have a little bit larger percentage there. We look at expenses, again, the expense profile here with, here's our auxiliary units. And you can see that in the first cut, you see dining, housing, parking, athletics, and student health. What jumps out is on dining, you see the 90% reliance or in supplies and materials. That's actually a reflection of the Aramark contract, and that's where you see the expense. So it's actually parked there. You have very little bit of university employees, and so in the salary and benefit, you see that small percentage there. You also might note, I think is interesting is the 19% in athletics you see in scholarships and fellowships. That's actually the expenses related to the scholarships for the athletes in there. And so you see that actually reflected there. And again, this is meant just to provide a high level kind of visual representation of some of the information in the budget. I'm going to shift gears now. So that was kind of an overview, high level. What do our numbers look like at the institution? I'd like to spend a little bit of time on just what guided when we talk about this process, and I laid out that timeline and the process we went through. How did we make decisions? What guided the budget deliberations? And it was three major themes: supporting Carolina's excellence, investing in North Carolina's future, and then fiscal responsibility. And when we talk about supporting Carolina's excellence, it's really our employees. The chancellor mentioned earlier the great resignation and the risk we have with human resources right now. A big focus of our budget discussion was ensuring we have funding and we prioritize attracting and retaining our top employees, funding salary adjustments, addressing compression, pay equity, turnover positions, having funds available for faculty and staff recruitment and retention. Beyond that, we've noted that we historically had some funding for F&A for startup, and we've tried to set aside some funding for that. We've strengthened graduate student funding in this budget. We also, you've heard from Becky Mangini in the past, and I think Candace and the operational excellence team on the future of work and that evolution of how we're evolving. And we want to ensure that we had funding available to really implement and execute that successfully. Second theme, really investing in North Carolina's future. What is UNC-Chapel Hill doing to meet the needs of the state? One, the workforce needs. You've heard some discussion around our enrollment expansion in recent years. Notably, this last year, we had a very, very large increase. A lot of the costs borne are being really shouldered in the College of Arts and Sciences. And so this budget really does shore up their finances. And it also funds enrollment program expansions in data science, medical education, nursing, business. We have a new Master's of Public Policy program. And we want to be positioned to take advantage of the online opportunities with Kitty Hawk coming on board. The other way university contributes to North Carolina, economic development, very important. Locally, we're moving forward on the Port Hole Alley project. I think the chancellor mentioned the Innovation Hub, which was recently approved by both our Board of Trustees and the Board of Governors on Franklin Street. So again, locally, really trying to spur economic development. Regionally, we think about that in terms of workforce development. And at the state level, we really think about it in terms of expanding our enrollment and really educating the workforce of the state. Innovation remains critical. In this budget, we really tried to look at all the various campus investments and university resources and trying to maximize those. And lastly, our research and clinical contributions. This budget invests in READY and the Eshelman Institute for Innovation. It also acknowledges the great success in the collaboratory and supports the operating expenses there. And the last big theme, again, that was driving in our deliberations is really, we wanted to do this based on a realistic assessment of funding that is available. And we are committed to sustaining the budget moving forward. This budget recognizes our commitment to affordability. We have a reduction in mandatory fees for our students embedded in this coming into this next year in fiscal year 23. We remain committed to taking care of our assets, even using our own funds. We've recognized waiting for the state to appropriate funding at all times for R&R and some of the other big needs we have on campus just wasn't sufficient. And so I think we do set aside funds to be able to try to address R&R needs. You've heard a lot of discussion about a new tuition and appropriation allocation model, some discussion around this in previous months. We've paused some of that work in light of the discussions at the UNC system level and at the Board of Governors level as they've been looking at a new funding model for the system. Part of that has been finalized, and you heard a little reference to that earlier. That was finalized just earlier this week. There's still a second half of that discussion that needs to happen yet, but we are positioned to move forward quickly once that is finalized so that our model on campus can really be aligned with how we're likely to get funding from the state. And lastly, we've been committed to looking at savings through efficiencies. I've already touched on this timeline, so I'll just be brief again. But pre-2019, I think it's worth big picture again reflecting on where we're at. Before 2019, didn't have a way to think about this at an institution level, a prospective plan. We really did use it successfully to weather, I think, a pretty challenging time, and I think we're in a stronger position financially and much more transparency moving forward. And when I think about this budget, I generally think we're fiscally balanced. We've aligned resources to our top priorities. We've invested in Carolina's workforce needs. We've advanced the state and regional economic development. We've invested in faculty and staff retention. The research enterprise is bolstered, and then really importantly, it's a tremendous improvement in budget transparency, and we do have some contingency funds. And with that, I can take questions on the budget piece, or I can also transition over and just address. I know the Chancellor mentioned university travel, and I can just provide a couple comments on that as well, if appropriate.
Yes, why don't you go ahead and do that, Nate, and then we can take questions about all of it at that point.
Okay, great. Well, I've also heard from many folks growing frustration with our new travel system. In many ways, this is I don't want to call it a good problem, but it does mean we're traveling again, and operations are normalizing, and I think that's good. We did implement a new system at a time when travel didn't occur. So I think some of the issues with implementation use are now just surfacing. So there is some upfront effort to get started in training and other pieces. We are collecting feedback, and we're committed to doing everything we can to improve the experience and what's happening. So I would encourage everyone to continue to provide feedback to our travel team. Provide it to me, Steve Agostini, Bo Jimerson. We want to understand. I also do want to share a little bit of context around the decision to use Concur. So one is just compliance with state and federal travel policies. We did have some issues with non-compliance, and the system, the way it can be implemented and administered, it really does ensure compliance. So that was one consideration around it. It also provides important visibility to the university on where Carolina employees are in the event of an emergency. And the need for this was really heightened, and it became more apparent during the early stages of the pandemic when there were some questions about where university employees were. It allows 24/7 support when disruptions arise, and it can improve some workflow. It really was an attempt, and it's really meant to modernize our travel system. So it really does reflect kind of best practice within the industry and higher ed, and it's implemented and used successfully across higher ed. Duke, Pitt, most of the Ivy League, most of the Big Ten, most of the number of universities is numerous that are using this. So that was some of the context around it, and again, I want to reiterate. We want feedback. This is early where we're just really starting to surface some issues, and these are issues that do warrant additional discussion, and our team wants to address those. So happy to take any questions.
Nate, do you want to stop your screen share?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, that'd be great. Okay, thanks. Jan, did you want to pose your question about travel?
I'm not sure. It's more to the provost because it has to do with the request for international travel, where the system is unbelievably ridiculous. I had to explain it to a number of my colleagues what needs to be done, and approval emails come back with clearly multiple staffs chiming in. It seems as highly inefficient system as it can be. And it was clearly designed for times when there were very little travel, and now there is a lot occasionally the people who do approval mix up requests and respond to one that was because, if faculty and a couple of graduate students come into them, it looks like a similar request. So, and at the same time, most of our peers are dropping this requirement. Like UVA doesn't have it anymore. A colleague of mine at University of California, Davis, said that they dropped this requirement of having a provost giving approval for international travel. So I feel like a lot of faculty time and a lot of highly paid staff time is wasted on this endeavor. And it's not clear what it's supposed to achieve. I also have frustrations with Concur. It's very tricky to use it. And I feel like sometimes you pay more for things because you have to buy airline tickets through Concur, and there is fee, and you don't always, it claims you get the same price, but I don't always feel like I do get the same price.
No, there seem to be myriad problems. I have a letter, I think, that's signed by gazillions of people in the medical school complaining. And I've heard about this in the college and all over. So, it doesn't seem like it's working, whatever is happening. So thank you for taking that on. And I'm hopeful that we can, just do whatever we have to get back to where people can do what they need to do.
No, I appreciate those comments, and I think it'll be important for us to really differentiate where there's a workflow issue with how our policy, the degree of flexibility we have around our own internal workflow, whether it's provost approval or other areas, what's required by policy and statute, and so what flexibility do we have around those things, and then what areas might there be within the system and how we've implemented it that might differ from how other institutions have done this and done it successfully, and where we're differentiated. And so again, I'd encourage everyone to provide the feedback so we can really start to catalog these issues and work through it. We're committed to working through this. And again, I do think it's important to note, this is really early in terms of, we're really just starting to travel again. And so we're starting to see these surface. We implemented the system at a time when no one was traveling. So we're just really starting to see some of these issues now.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I don't see other questions right now for Nate. Are there more? Okay. Thank you very much for your time today. Thanks for coming. Mm-hmm. All right. At this point, Jill, shall I turn it over to you?
Yes, I believe Misha Becker is with us, and she is going to bring forward a joint resolution from her committee and two others on salary equity. Misha, are you with us and ready to bring forward your resolution?
Yep, I'm here. Do you have a copy of the resolution to share, or do you want me to share my screen?
I think Helena has it ready. Helena, do you have the resolution to share?
Yes, just give me a second.
I guess I can start while it's coming up, because this is closely related to the presentation I made at the last month's faculty council meeting, which most of you probably heard. So this is related to the issue of salary equity. I chair the Committee on the Status of Women, and together with the Fixed Term Faculty Committee and the Faculty Welfare Committee, our three committees got together and wanted to propose a resolution to outline some steps that we believe are necessary for coming closer to the goal of gender and racial salary equity on our campus. Let's see, is it showing yet? I'm not seeing it.
Just another minute. Oh, there we go.
There we go. Great. So, so this is a resolution on salary equity for faculty members of UNC-Chapel Hill, and so there are a couple of components to the resolution, or a couple of parts to it. The one part is that we want to have regular annual reports, analyses and reports of salary equity coming from covering the whole campus. And that in addition to those annual analyses and reports, that every couple of years there should be a tracking of our progress, of sort of trends. Are we getting better? Are we staying the same? Are things going the wrong direction? The second part of it is more details about how the overall project should be implemented. So we advocate for forming a salary equity oversight committee that would basically oversee this annual salary analysis and would sort of investigate the policies and practices around salary allocation, raise allocation, that sort of thing, and help move us towards institutional goals. And that the salary report would need to be able to look within units, so that the salary studies that we've seen in the past aggregate across multiple units, and it makes it kind of hard to see where particular problems are most acute. And so we want to advocate for doing these analyses within units. And then the other parts of our resolution have to do with the creation of a public website, so that people can see where we're going, how we're doing on this, having sort of a dashboard like we had during COVID to track how we are doing. And then the fourth component has to do with the collection and analysis of exit survey data. I know that on the HR website, there's information about exit surveys, but from speaking with faculty who have left UNC, my understanding is that they are not typically conducted. And it's not clear to me whether there is data that is collected in any systematic form that can be looked at. So that's the meat of our resolution. And I would like to make a motion to adopt this resolution by Faculty Council.
So moved. Okay, so Misha made the initial motion. So Deb, I'm going to take yours as a second. So we have that brings the matter properly before the council. Is there any discussion of this resolution? Misha, I'll let you run the conversation if you will, please.
Sure. I don't see, Allison made a comment in the chat. You're welcome, Allison. Thank you.
You do have a couple of hands up. Jan Honig and Mark McNeely have hands up.
Okay, I'm not able to see.
Okay, I'll call on folks then. Jan, your hand went up first.
Thank you. I just have a question. That one thing that surprised me, that among these goals, there is nothing about comparison to our peer institutions. Would that be valuable to know where we stand compared to our peers?
Absolutely. Our committee did a sort of ad hoc comparison across a bunch of institutions, but I do think that having comparison data would be very useful to have. Yes.
Like having it as a part E of your, or A, B, C, D, because it's not there.
Yeah, it could even be part of part B, potentially. And yeah, I should have also mentioned, I didn't say this out loud, but it's in the wording of the resolution that we envision this as being a long-term project. So we stated it as a 20-year initiative, and that number is fairly arbitrary, but the point is just to make sure that this extends for beyond, just one cycle, to allow us to really gain ground on this. But yes, Jan, that's a great suggestion to have this also include cross-institution comparison. Mark, I see your hand.
Yeah, I was looking at in 2B, you don't break it out by discipline, and it would seem disciplines or department, right? So, there are probably, I'm sure there are differences between gender in different areas. And there are differences, obviously, in different areas on salary. So I'm interested in why that, unless I'm missing it here, isn't included in 2B.
So we didn't, yeah, you're right. We didn't state discipline explicitly. So you're thinking discipline as department within each unit?
Or school or something like that. It means, what the salaries are in, say, the business school are different than they are, say, in political science, and different in the law school, and different in STEM disciplines, right? So, and I'm sure there are differences by gender within those, between disciplines, right? So if you don't take into account disciplines, then you're not really factoring in the fact that there might be, more men in one and more women in another one.
I think the unit language covers some of that, Mark.
Is that within the unit or between units?
Within each unit.
Okay, well, you need to look at it between units, right?
Well, we wouldn't, based on what you just said, you wouldn't expect the law school to have this, you wouldn't expect equity between the law school and linguistics, to pick on Misha, so no, it would be within. You would want to look within the law school. Is there equity within the law school?
Yes, you'd want to look at equity with all the different variables within the law school. But what I'm saying is, when you take the look back and say, okay, I'm looking across the university, and if you look at by simple gender, that there are differences.
That's why that's why 2B is there and says look within the law, within the units.
Yeah. So if I can finish, if that's right, you're within that school, you have to look. But if you take a look back at the entire university, you also have to look beyond just male versus female numbers, but also take into account all those other factors when you are comparing across genders. Does that make sense?
So so department was one of the things that were controlled for in the OIRA studies that have been done. So that is something. So I think doing the studies then within the units, so within the college, within the law school, within the School of Government. I don't actually know how the law school and School of Government work in terms internally. So do they have separate departments? I assume so. But so those department could also be controlled for at that level, but it has not been so far. So we would be applying the same kinds of analyses that have been done previously, but at a finer grained level, which is what you need in order to figure out how people compare with their peers, where peers are defined, appropriately, because so far we just have this really big bird's eye view. And
right.
So too many things are aggregated together. And so what we are proposing is that we disaggregate.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. As long as you get it down and you can count for all the variables, then I think that makes sense.
Okay.
Jan, is your hand up again, or is that okay. Right.
I don't know how to make an amendment, so I was about to type it in the chat. Maybe that's.
The way to make an amendment is to make a motion to amend and tell me what it is. And then we will see if there's a second for that, and we'll take a vote on whether whether the group wants to make the amendment.
So I want to make an motion that we amend part 2B by adding appropriate comparisons to peer institutions should be made.
So, where do you want that to go?
I don't know, I'm probably at the very end.
I think we could just add a sentence there at the end.
Does that capture your meaning?
Yeah, I like that. That's a good sentence addition.
So that's, there's a motion to make this amendment. Is there a second? To amend?
Second,
Okay.
this is Renee.
Thank you, Renee. So there's a motion and a second to amend. Any discussion of the proposed amendment? Just the amendment at this point, not the whole thing.
Yeah, I have a question. This is Eric. Can I go ahead?
Yes, please.
Jan, I'm struggling a little bit to understand what it is. I mean, certainly there's no question that the comparative data from other institutions would be, sort of intellectually interesting, but I'm not entirely sure what we would do with that information. If we're working from a premise that we want to attain equity, then I don't, I'm not sure that I know that it'll mean a whole lot to know that our gap between men and women may be smaller than some of our peers, or even larger for that matter. So could you just help me understand a little bit better why the comparative data is going to be helpful to us?
Me, it feels like that I would like to know what's possible, or if we are leaders or if we are laggers. I think knowing where we are compared to our peers helps us to understand whether we are, whether there's something like if we are lagging, we might be able to go and look at the ones who are doing better and ask what they are doing better. If we are leading, I guess that'll not give us much.
I wonder if we'll be able to get that data. I mean, that it would present sort of a practical problem. Not every institution is going to be publishing what their equity gap is. So we may be setting something up that we can't achieve.
That's a good point. So the Chronicle of Higher Ed does have comparative data that can be searched, but it's not going to be at the level of granularity that I'm proposing we should achieve with this resolution. So it may be something that we could look at from a broad scope level, but not at the level that is useful for achieving better equity.
This is Renee. So are we saying this would be a nice to know from a 30,000-foot view?
I think in some ways, in my view, it's a bit of a different question. So if we're saying, how do our salaries overall compare to other institutions, that data does exist. If we're saying, are we better or worse in terms of an equity gap, that relies on other institutions being willing to share that data with us. And so, I guess I would hate to make the resolution reliant on that. And I think it's important to remind everybody that 3 committees have worked on this. 3 committees have endorsed it. And so, it's always tempting to wordsmith it or add in this and that. But we do, a lot of work has been done on this, and Misha has presented her findings in multiple venues. Allison.
Thank you. This is kind of to extend on your point that there are a lot of things that maybe could be added when it comes to this data comparison. I would think demographic pools, labor availability pools, recent graduation rates from the places where we pipeline a lot of folks. And I would say that that's all maybe down the line. Getting the data in the first place is a pretty big deal. And so I think that the resolution as it stands, even without an amendment, is quite amazing as a thing for our institution to do. So I would support moving forward without a resolution, because I think we could get messy in terms of what data we want to compare everything to.
Allison,
an amendment, moving forward without the amendment.
Okay, thanks. Deb?
I kind of like the amendment because in many ways, Jan's idea would help us look at other institutions. For example, as we all know, University of Missouri, they really felt bad about all of the inequities. And so they have invested $500 million for staff and faculty raises. So it would be good to include data whenever it's appropriate from peer institutions, because when we have a project like this, it would be helpful to make our Board of Governors and Board of Trustees understand the need for that. So I don't see any harm in including information from peer institutions.
Could it be stated as, to the extent the data is available or something like that? Or does that make it?
Yeah, I think
that's why I had the appropriate, right? Because I don't know what they.
I think that you could read that into appropriate. Also, we do have the question that before the council at this time is just this amendment. We could make a friendly amendment to the amendment, or we could move ahead and vote on the proposal to amend.
Eric, did you have a comment?
No, I think that I forgot to lower my hand.
Okay. Jennifer, I see your hand up.
Thank you. I just wanted to reiterate Suchi's point and that others have agreed with it in the chat. And I'm also on, I sit as the FPC liaison on the Fixture and Faculty Committee. And so I agree that a lot of voices and ideas went into this. And I think focusing on these key data that we're trying to get that are very difficult to get. And then, like Allison said, thinking of these other ideas is maybe something we could build on, but we need to keep the focus on this very core set of what is happening here, because that is not easy data to get. There's lots of different perspectives on it. So I don't think we want to water that down.
I'm not sure why is it a difficult data to get. My undergraduate student got data for 3 public universities, salary on every employee, every single one of them. And we did some calculations with them. So I don't know if it's...
Well, with all due respect, Jan, I think Misha's presentation last time and the presentations that have been done on this show how difficult this data is to get. It is not simple data. There's a lot that goes into interpreting it. It's very controversial in terms of what even the base data are. So I think keeping that focus on the reason we're doing this resolution is because we have had trouble getting the data. I've been on multiple committees where we've tried to get this data from different people. We've gotten different perspectives on it. So again, I think it's really important to follow the lead of these committees and ask for the data that they are asking for, because they have really good reason for asking for what they're asking for.
Yeah, it's this within unit data that's hard, Jan, because you get into small cell sizes, and our HR folks have not felt like it was appropriate legally to disclose it. So there needs to be an entity that has that authority that includes faculty. So that's I think other alternatives are we could pass the resolution as it stands, which has been reviewed by 3 committees, worked on very hard. The chancellor is actually quite committed to this. So, to move this forward, and then there could be recommendations to the committee for other things to investigate. There are actually peer comparisons that happen already in the Office of Institutional Research. I mean, that comes out. So that is a great thing to do. It's not necessarily what isn't being done that we're trying to remedy with this resolution.
Can I call the question on the motion to amend?
Okay, the question has been called. That's not debatable, but it is something that has to be voted on. Helena, will you launch a poll? What we are voting on now is whether to call the question. We need a 2/3 vote. Only faculty council members may vote.
Can you remind us what yes and no mean?
Yes means that call the question, debate ends on this amendment. Then we proceed to a vote on the amendment. No means you want to keep debating this amendment.
Oh.
Yeah, that's kind of important, isn't it? Okay, we have a quorum that's voted, so we're just going to keep it open for about 5 more seconds. Okay, we don't appear to be getting any more votes, so we'll end it. And the question, the motion to call the question has survived. We're done talking about the amendment, but we still have to vote on the amendment. We have an amendment on the floor. So Helena, if you could launch a second vote. And this vote is to vote yes or no on whether you want to approve this amendment to the resolution. So yes, you want to add the language that's underlined. No, you do not.
Should we be seeing that now?
I think the poll has blocked the underlined language. Let me see if I can. There it is.
No, I'm sorry. Should we be seeing the vote right now?
Oh, should you be seeing the poll?
No.
Yes.
Okay, I don't see it.
Who is not seeing the poll?
Does it just say on the current question? Is that what we're going to see?
Yes, that's what you're going to see. So yes means yes to the amendment. No means no. And this is a simple majority.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Okay. The votes have stopped coming in, so I'm going to call it. The motion to amend has failed. So we are back to the initial resolution. So that is without this new language. Is there further discussion on the resolution?
I'd like to call the question on the resolution.
Okay, we need another poll calling the question. To vote for yes means that you want to stop discussion on the resolution. Voting no means you want to continue to debate the resolution.
Could you say that again, please?
Yes means you want to stop debating the resolution and move to a final vote. No means you want to continue to discuss the resolution.
Thank you.
Okay, let's stop the vote. 96% want to stop and 4% abstain. Okay, so now the question's been called. We will move to a vote on the resolution. So we are going to go to a fourth poll. And the question for this poll, it's going to be worded the same. How do you vote on the current question? The current question is whether or not to approve resolution 2022-1. A vote of yes means yes, we approve the resolution. A vote of no means no, we do not. And you also may abstain and register your abstention. Let's stop the poll. 96% vote yes, 4% abstain. The resolution is adopted.
All right, very good. Thank you to Misha and to all the committee members and all 3 committees that really did a deep dive into this work, produced a very informative report and brought this forward. So I think now is the moment. We do have a chancellor who's committed right now to looking at this. So I'm very pleased that we can move this forward at this time. Our next agenda item is a resolution that comes to us from our retired faculty colleagues. Probably close to a year ago, they reached out to me and Jill came into that conversation talking about the uneven ways in which emeritus status is conveyed across the campus with for some units, it being virtually automatic, for others, it being a very cumbersome process and at times somewhat capricious. So we wanted to remedy that. We had extensive discussions with the folks in HR, with Becky Mangini and her team, others in her team, and spoke with the chancellor as well about that, the provost. So there's been a lot of vetting of this as well. It's come to FEC for discussion several times. And so I wanted to ask our representatives to the retired faculty if they had anything they wanted to say about this, and then turn it over to Jill for a little further discussion of the resolution itself and the resolution that it replaces. George or Lynn, would you like to say anything? George, I think you're muted, or Lynn, maybe.
Okay, sorry. I'm going to make very brief remarks, and then my colleague from the Retired Faculty Association is Lynn Vernon Fagans. She has very brief remarks. So the Retired Faculty Association is presenting this motion for Resolution 2022-2 in response to some members who, upon facing their recent retirements, found their right to the title of Emeritus Emerita had been denied with no explanation offered and no opportunity to appeal. This resolution grants them that opportunity to appeal to the provost. For the overwhelming majority of retiring faculty, the title of Emeritus Emerita is a presumed right and is conferred without difficulty. Only for a very small number who had found themselves denied that right did we come to the conclusion that it should be put forth as a resolution. And that is what we are doing today. And I believe you have a copy of it before you. There are also put forth a couple of examples for denying the academic title, such as cases where, quote, a faculty member is the subject of a disciplinary or discharge proceeding at the time of the retirement, end of quote. In these instances of denial, a written response from the retiree's academic unit should be provided. We are not redefining the criteria for the conferral of such titles, emeritus and emerita, nor are we questioning the right of a given academic unit to deny this conferral when circumstances dictate. But the denial should be accompanied by specific and written reasons. And finally, we are offering the denied retiree the right of appeal to the provost. So Lynn, if you'd like to take it from there.
Thanks, George. Well, George Lensing just reviewed for all of you the first part of the resolution related to emeritus emerita status for voting faculty here at UNC. We're very excited that all eligible voting faculty will likely be able to become emeritus faculty if this resolution passes. The second part of the resolution is not mandatory for schools and departments, but is related to suggested practices by departments and schools. Here at UNC, there's a wide variety of practices related to the visibility of emerita faculty in their home departments and schools, from almost no mention of them after they retire to providing many resources for them to continue their involvement. Thus, the second part of the resolution hopes to promote emeritus faculty's connections for those who want the connection to the university by using the words encouraged to provide or should. As can be seen in the second part of the resolution, schools and departments are encouraged to list emeritus emerita faculty on their websites and allow the emeritus faculty to also list links to their research websites, their current vita, and other important information. And for instance, if, maybe be able to provide office space if that's possible. Although not part of this resolution, we do hope that emeritus faculty can be seen as valuable participants in their department and schools through not only their research, but their participation in a variety of activities like mentoring junior faculty, undergraduate, graduate students, and participating in activities with alumni. We encourage schools and departments to include retired faculty as important resources who continually contribute to the betterment of UNC. Thus, we hope you all will pass this resolution. Donna Falvo, who's the president of the Retired Faculty Association, George and I are now ready to answer questions that any of you might have.
Jill, may I move adoption of the resolution?
Yes, thank you. Professor Lensing has moved for adoption of the resolution. Is there a second?
Second, it's Renee again.
Thank you, Renee. So it's before the council. Is there any discussion or questions for the presenters? Hearing none, are we ready to vote? Okay, Helena's going to launch another poll, and this time, if you vote yes, you're voting in favor of the resolution, and no, you're voting against the resolution. And we'll keep it open until we get to that magic number of participants where we've seemed to max out. Did you close the vote, Helena?
Yes, can you see
Okay,
it?
yes, I can see it. Okay, so we just have smaller numbers, but we still have a quorum. So 98% have voted in favor. We had an abstention. Thank you. The resolution is adopted.
I think this is a really great thing. I think it's a way to show our retired faculty how much we value them. And you'll remember there was a time, a budget crisis a number of years ago. The retired faculty volunteered to come back and teach in order to help. And there have been multiple times throughout my time in this office where people have reached out to me to say, how can I help you think through this issue? And so I just really want to affirm our retired faculty, and I'm so happy that this resolution has passed.
Maybe shall I continue, because we do have some committee reports to accept?
Yes, please.
Okay, we have 5 committee reports this month. The reports were provided in advance for you to look at, and they're scheduled to be accepted by title, which means that the chairs have not been asked to make a formal presentation, but they are present to take any questions that you might have. Are there any questions for any of the committee chairs whose reports were submitted for this meeting? Okay, seeing none, I propose that we accept these reports by unanimous consent, which does not require a motion or a vote. If we proceed by that route, all council members present are recorded as having voted in favor of accepting the reports. If there's an objection, then we'll proceed to a motion and have a vote. Is there any objection to accepting these reports by unanimous consent? Seeing no objection, the reports are accepted. Shall I keep going? We have 2 ceremonial resolutions to consider today. I'd like to invite a motion to suspend the rules to consider these 2 resolutions, which have not been previously presented to the council. Since you haven't seen them before, but we do need to suspend the rules to vote on them. However, without objection, we don't have to do another poll. We can suspend the rules by unanimous consent unless someone objects to that. And that simply means that we'll proceed to hear the resolutions. Is there any objection to suspending the rules in order to allow the 2 resolutions to be read? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to ask Professor Kurt Gilliland if you can present the first ceremonial resolution, please. And I believe Helena is going to share it on screen as well.
So on behalf of the Administrative Board of the Libraries, I would like to present to you Resolution 2022-3 on appreciation for Elaine L. Westbrooks as University Librarian and Vice Provost for University Libraries. Whereas Elaine L. Westbrooks has been Vice Provost for University Libraries and University Librarian at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill since 2017, leading a library system that includes 10 libraries, nearly 10 million volumes, and 300 librarians, archivists, and staff members. And whereas she has contributed with unusual imagination, energy, and commitment to addressing needs crucial to research, student success, and preservation of the historic record of the state and university. And whereas she has been an innovator and leader in sustainable scholarship, philanthropic growth, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, and global engagement. And whereas she has advocated tirelessly and effectively for the resources and services our libraries need and our faculty members depend on. Therefore, be it resolved that the faculty of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill express our deep gratitude to Elaine Westbrooks for her leadership, energetic personality, collegial attitude, and innovative spirit, and for her immensely important and singular contributions to the cause of research, scholarship, teaching, and creativity at this university and throughout the academic world.
Thank you, Professor Gilliland. Without objection, I propose that we accept this by unanimous consent. Hearing no objection, it's accepted, and our congratulations and thanks to Elaine Westbrooks.
Thank you.
Okay. Now I'm going to
see a hand up from Sheila. I don't know. Is that?
Oh, is that okay?
Okay.
Okay. Maybe I think that was a high five for Elaine, perhaps. There we go. Okay. And Mimi, could you present the next ceremonial resolution, please? And I'll ask Helena to share that one.
Yes, I am very happy to present Resolution 2022-4 on appreciation for the service of Ronald P. Strauss as Executive Vice Provost of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Whereas Ron Strauss has served as Executive Vice Provost of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill since 2008, overseeing many activities of great importance to the faculty, of which he has been a member since 1974, currently holding appointments in the schools of dentistry, medicine, and public health. And whereas he has served the university in numerous other ways, including as Chief International Officer for nearly a decade, as Faculty Director of the Strategic Community Engagement, Education, and Dissemination Office of the UNC Center for AIDS Research, and as a lead faculty member of the Thorpe Faculty Engaged Scholars Program of the Carolina Center for Public Service. And whereas he has been an exemplary teacher, scholar, clinician, and mentor at UNC, and indeed across the globe. And whereas to many of us, he is a friend who offers encouragement and wise counsel on the best of days and on the worst. And whereas he has demonstrated unfailing excellence, graciousness, wisdom, and collegiality in all that he undertakes. Therefore, be it resolved that the faculty of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill honors and expresses our deepest gratitude to Ron Strauss for his outstanding service and dedication to our university, the state of North Carolina, and the world.
Without objection, the resolution is approved by unanimous consent of the Faculty Council. Congratulations and thank you to Ron.
Thank you so much. I'm really gratified and surprised. So thank you very much.
All right. This brings us to the end of our agenda. And Elaine and Ron, Elaine, we're going to miss you here at UNC. Ron, we're going to miss you in your current role, but glad you will be with us on the faculty. So I wish everybody a very happy summer. I'm hopeful that I will not have to call you back into session for any reason whatsoever. And so keep your fingers crossed on that one. And best to everyone. See you in the fall.
you.